Vandana Shiva, world-renowned environmental leader, feminist, and thinker from India, is the author of many books, including Earth, Democracy, Justice, Sustainability, and Peace, and Staying Alive, Women, Ecology, and Development. I started our conversation by asking Vandana Shiva about the nuclear catastrophe in Japan and what it has meant for India, where major anti-nuclear protests have been sparked, in which one protester was killed. I asked her to explain what happened.
We have a very, very strong anti-nuclear movement in India, and the difference between the Indian movement and any other movement is it's not just about the stupidity of splitting the atom to boil water, which is what nuclear power ultimately is, creating huge amounts of radiation hazard in the process. But in India, it involves the typical violence of land grab. And one of the most fertile parts of India in the Western Ghats, the Ratnagiri district, they're planning to set up the biggest ever nuclear power plant of the world, being built by a French company, Arriva, violating every right of the people, including local democracy, where people have a right to decide what happens. All the local authorities have resigned, and the protests continue. And just 2 days ago, there was a killing when the police fired on peaceful protesters. So in India, the costs are even higher because the human costs join with the costs of nuclear hazard. And from 23rd to 26th, a march is being organized, and I'm part of the organizing group, from Tarapur, which is the oldest nuclear power plant of India, to Jaitapur, which is where this giant mega nuclear power park is being set up.
And people live there. They'll be displaced.
People live there. I mean, typical of such things. They claimed it was barren land and nobody was there. It's one of the most fertile. That's where this wonderful Alfonso mango comes from, this amazing giant-sized delicious mango. Good fisheries, amazing horticulture, and well-to-do people, because nature is abundant. It's the Western Ghats where the monsoon just pours the water, and coastal regions are usually just the more productive, more fertile. A similar protest is happening around a steel plant called POSCO, with a Korean plant, but it's not owned by the Koreans anymore. It's owned by Wall Street. It's owned by the financial institutions of this city who brought down the world's economy. And it was very interesting that Warren Buffett was in India about giving, you know, creating the art of giving. And he has huge shares in the steel plant, which will displace large numbers of people. And for 6 years, people have been saying, no, we will not give our land. And I think that's so important, that we need to realize that, first, we don't give rights to nature. Nature has rights. And more often than not, nature's rights and people's rights are allied as one in most places of the world, where in places like Jaitapur or places like the POSCO area, people are saying this land is our mother. This is not an esoteric idea. It's the most relevant, potent, democratic idea of our times.
I wanted to ask you about a man you probably would agree with on a number of issues, George Monbiot. We recently had on debating the issue of nuclear power. This is what he had to say.
Well, obviously what's happening in Fukushima concerns me a lot about the area surrounding Fukushima. It's a horrible, dangerous, extremely traumatic series of events that we are seeing there. But I'm very worried that the global response to what's happening in Fukushima will be to shut down nuclear power stations around the world and to cancel future nuclear power stations, and that what will happen is that they will be replaced by coal. Now, coal is hundreds of times more dangerous than nuclear power. Not just because of climate change, though of course climate change is the big one, but also because of industrial accidents and because of the impacts of pollution on local people. If we just look at industrial accidents alone, these massively outweigh both the fatalities and the injuries caused by any nuclear accident we've ever seen. In China alone, last year, 2,300 people were killed in industrial accidents to do with coal mining. Purely by coal mining accidents, 2,300 killed. That's 6 people a day. That means that in 1 week, the official death toll from coal in China is greater than the official death toll from Chernobyl in 25 years. And that's to say nothing of the hundreds of thousands of people contracting really unpleasant lung diseases which will cause them a very slow and painful and terrible death. So what I'm calling for here is not complacency. I think it's absolutely appropriate to be very concerned indeed about what's happening in Fukushima, but I'm calling for perspective, and I'm saying that we must not replace a bad technology with a much, much worse one, because unfortunately that is what's likely to happen.
So that was the well-known British columnist George Monbiot, who is in favor of nuclear power, says it's simply cleaner than coal. And if we're talking about climate change, which he is deeply concerned about, nuclear is the answer.
Well, what we really need is a coal-free and nuclear-free future, because the sun's energy is so abundant, and we've not even started to tap it in sensible ways. Alternative renewable energies, if only we would put the investments in that direction, would be affordable, would be decentralized. Nuclear must be a centralized system, and as we are witnessing in Jaitapur with the protests, with the shootings and the killings, and the place turned into a total police state where nobody can gather, even the elected officials can't hold meetings, where democracy has to be sacrificed, that's not the kind of option we need for energy. And I think it's wrong of George Monbiot to rubbish the point of view of millions of people around the world, including governments, like the government of Germany said, we won't build any more nuclear power plants. China, which has put everything on hold. Now, these countries aren't crazy. They aren't a fringe. And I personally get disappointed when friends like George Monbiot think they are the wisest ones on this planet. And just because they have a column, they can switch everyone's way of thinking. There is an ancient recognition of the hazards of nuclear. I began my life in the nuclear industry of India. And it's when my sister woke me up to the damages. I wasn't ever taught radiation biology. We were just taught physics, fission physics. And I realized it was very partial knowledge.
You are a physicist.
Yes, and then I did theoretical physics. And eventually I did foundations of quantum theory. And what I love about the rights of Mother Earth is we are overcoming the separation between humans and nature that was built into the Cartesian thinking that nature's out there and we are out here, but also the kind of divisive separatedness that Cormac pointed out yesterday at the United Nations Conference on Harmony with Nature. He said, I began my life fighting apartheid, and apartheid means separateness. Separateness on the basis of color. I think separateness is the disease of the past. It's the dinosaur in the intellectual frame. Separateness was a very artificial imposition. Most civilizations of the world, for most of human history, have seen the world in terms of relatedness and connection. And if there's one thing the rights of Mother Earth is waking us to, is we are all connected. And it's in that connection we can't have arrogant solutions like nuclear is clean. Just because you don't see the radiation doesn't make it clean. Fukushima has become like Chernobyl, and that the Japanese government is ready.